After gaining independence, the Republic of Slovenia inherited two different types of main battle tanks from the disintegrating Yugoslavia. The first was the T-55, an obsolete vehicle that had previously been imported in large numbers by the Yugoslav People's Army, or JNA for short. The second was a more modern, license-produced version of the Soviet T-72M, featuring an improved fire control system and electronics known as the M-84. As the newly established Slovenian armed forces opted to maintain armored battalions, it soon became clear that the existing tank fleet would need to be modernized to remain viable on the modern battlefield. Surprisingly, it was the older T-55 and not the newer and more capable M-84 that received the bulk of the upgrade effort. This led to the development of the M-55S, a significantly improved variant that featured a new 105mm gun, explosive reactive armor, and a range of other improvements. Despite the thorough modernization, the M-55S was soon mothballed and put up for sale. In 2022, the majority of these tanks were delivered to Ukraine as military aid. Before we dive deeper into the story of the M-55S, let's talk about a game that puts main battle tanks like it directly under your command. Supremacy World War III is a free online real-time grand strategy game where you lead a real nation into modern global warfare. In Supremacy World War III, you'll build and command armies of tanks, jets, and submarines, forge alliances or declare wars, and compete against up to 99 other players in massive, weeks-long campaigns for world domination. Strategy is everything, so plan logistics, research over 250 unit types, and deploy cutting-edge technology to beat your rivals to a pulp. This season, the stakes are even higher. A mutating zombie virus threatens humanity, and new drone motherships bring tech-heavy warfare to a new level. Plus, the brand new officer system lets you recruit elite commanders with powerful abilities to turn the tide of battle. Best of all, Supremacy World War III is free to play and available on PC and mobile, so you can command the battlefield anytime, anywhere. Click the link in the description or scan the QR code to start playing. And as a bonus for new players, you'll receive an exclusive seasonal unit worth like $25 free for the next 30 days. So don't miss out. Try it out today. Following Stalin's death in 1953, relations between Yugoslavia and the Soviet Union began to improve. By the late 1950s, Yugoslavia withdrew from Mutual Defense Assistance Program with the West and resumed arms purchases from the East. The Soviets, for their part, had just what Yugoslavia was looking for, a brand new main battle tank. The T-55 was an improved version of the earlier T-54, one of the world's first true main battle tanks, though the Soviets considered it a medium. Because the upgrades were incremental, both are often considered variants of the same basic design, which went on to become the most produced tank in history. Built under license across the Warsaw Pact, the T-54-55 family was also supplied to Yugoslavia, which continued procuring them from Eastern Bloc partners even after the Soviets moved on to newer tanks. The first Yugoslav deliveries consisted of T-54As, equipped with the D-10TG 100mm gun, single-axis stabilization, and the T-Shaw 2B-22 day sight. Powered by a 520 horsepower V54 diesel engine, they featured a cast turret with 200mm of frontal armor and a welded hull with 100mm sloped at 60 degrees. From 1964, Yugoslavia received upgraded T-54Bs and its first T-55s. The T-54B carried the improved D-10T2S gun with two-plane stabilization, the L2 Luna IR spotlight, and a new set of optics for both gunner and commander. The T-55 introduced the stronger 581 horsepower V55 engine, a revised fuel tank layout, increased ammo stowage, and, most importantly, the NBC protection. In 1967, deliveries of the T-55A to Yugoslavia began. Once again, the primary improvements focused on NBC protection, as the tank was now equipped with anti-radiation lining and an enhanced chemical filtration system. In total, the Yugoslav People's Army received over 1,700 T-54 and 55 tanks of all variants. This made it the most common tank in the Yugoslav arsenal and the most capable one until the arrival of the T-72M and its Yugoslav license-produced variant in the 1980s. Thanks to its solid reliability and low maintenance costs, the T-55 remained a mainstay in Yugoslav armored battalions and reserve depots, never fully replaced by the locally produced M-84. By the early 1990s, Yugoslavia was unraveling under the weight of political divisions, ethnic tensions, and economic crisis. Communist rule collapsed, nationalist parties rose to power across the republics, and on June 25, 1991, both Slovenia and Croatia declared independence. The federal government denounced the move as unconstitutional, and the JNA was ordered to intervene, sparking the short but decisive 10-day war in Slovenia. The operation was led by the JNA's 5th Military District, which fielded hundreds of tanks, including T-55s and the M-84s. Yet despite its impressive arsenal, the offensive faltered from the beginning, crippled by political indecision, strict rules of engagement, and collapsing morale. Desertions were rampant, with many conscripts surrendering or abandoning their posts, while Slovenia's territorial defense forces proved cohesive, motivated, and well prepared. Armed with smuggled anti-tank weapons, they launched ambushes against JNA columns, where the loss of just a few vehicles was often enough to compel entire units to surrender. On June 28, Slovenian forces captured several JNA T-55s at Rajna Dolina and Vrtriba, quickly organizing them into new armored companies. 2 days later, these tanks took part in the assault on the Ajšarica barracks, where a rare tank-on-tank duel ended with one Slovenian T-55 destroyed. Additional captures followed at Strihović, Ranči, and near Ormož, where Slovenian units seized or destroyed several more JNA tanks. By July, it was clear that the JNA was losing in Slovenia, suffering heavy losses with little to show for it. Faced with a choice of escalation or withdrawal, the federal government chose to shift focus to Croatia, where conflict between Croats and Serbs was escalating, while allowing ethnically homogeneous Slovenia to go its own way. The war officially ended on July 7th with the Brioni Agreement, under which Slovenia and Croatia suspended their independence declarations for 3 months in exchange for a JNA withdrawal. By then, Slovenia's territorial defense had captured about 30 tanks, mostly T-55s, yet an even larger influx of equipment was on the horizon. With the outbreak of full-scale war in Croatia, land routes of evacuation were cut off, forcing JNA personnel to withdraw by sea and abandon much of their heavy equipment, which was promptly seized by the Slovenian Territorial Defense Forces. Once the situation stabilized, Slovenia was left with between 70 and 90 T-55 tanks. Since a variety of JNA armored units had operated in the conflict, the captured tanks represented a wide mix of models and countries of origin. Some were damaged, but the best conditioned examples were retained to equip 2 armored battalions. Another 2 battalions will be outfitted with captured M-84 tanks. Older vehicles, such as T-34s, were either sold to Croatia or scrapped. Initially, there were fears that the JNA would first retake Croatia in 1991 and then launch a renewed offensive into Slovenia. Instead, the JNA's advance into Croatia soon stalled, and both Slovenia and Croatia achieved international recognition in 1992. With this, the JNA withdrew entirely from both republics, and Slovenia's independence was effectively secured. With the Yugoslav threat removed, Slovenia began transforming its territorial defense into the newly established Slovenian Armed Forces. In December 1991, a group of former JNA mechanics began repairing and restoring the captured equipment, which soon led to the creation of the 44th Armored Mechanized Battalion. This unit was tasked not only with maintenance, but also with training new personnel for the mechanized forces, and it was equipped with 4 M-84 tanks and 14 T-55s. On March 30, 1992, the 74th Armored Mechanized Battalion was established in Maribor as part of the 72nd Brigade, fielding another 27 T-55 tanks. With these battalions now established, Slovenia turned to its next challenge, modernization. While the M-84s were already beginning to show their age, the T-55s were utterly obsolete and ill-suited for the emerging digital battlefield. At the same time, the military-industrial branches of Slovenian companies such as TAM and Fotona were struggling to stay afloat. Prior to the collapse of Yugoslavia, Fotona had been developing a range of upgrade systems intended not only for the JNA, but also for the international market. However, with the withdrawal of federal funding, Slovenia's defense industry now faced a serious risk of bankruptcy. Despite operating under a tight budget, the decision was made to modernize all M84 tanks using Fotona's new fire control system, giving birth to the M84A4. Surprisingly, all 60 T-55s were also set aside for modernization that would ultimately prove far more extensive than the one applied to the M84s. To carry out this ambitious task, Slovenia partnered with Israel, a nation with extensive experience in modernizing Soviet-designed armored vehicles. The project was led by ST Ravna, another struggling Slovenian company which used to be involved with the production of armored plates for the Yugoslavian M84. The resulting upgraded vehicle was designated the M-55S. The starting point of the modernization was the rearmament of the tank with a new 105mm gun. This weapon was an unnamed Israeli variant of the British Royal Ordnance L7, one of the most effective anti-tank guns of the Cold War. Although the breech had to be modified to fit the T-55's turret, the new gun was similar in size to the original Soviet 100mm and fit without issue, remaining fully stabilized. The barrel was also fitted with a thermal sleeve. One major advantage of this new gun was its compatibility with all NATO's standard 105mm ammunition, which was crucial for Slovenia given that Soviet 100mm ammunition was in very short supply. The country was granted access to advanced Israeli ammunition, including the M426 Hetz-10 armor-piercing fin-stabilized discarding sabot, which could penetrate 380mm of armor at 2,000 meters. Remarkably, this gave the M-55S greater armor penetration capability than even the M-84's 125mm gun, firing older Yugoslav-produced 3BM9 and 3BM12 APFSDS rounds. In addition to APFSDS rounds, Slovenia also received M156 high-explosive squash head and M152/3 high-explosive anti-tank munitions. It is likely that a variety of anti-personnel, cluster, and high-explosive fragmentation rounds were also offered, though the exact ammunition types adopted remain unclear. The tank carried a total of 44 rounds of 105mm ammunition. The coaxial PKT 7.62mm machine gun and the Dushka 12.7mm heavy machine gun mounted for anti-aircraft defense remained unchanged. As part of the M-55S modernization project, the Slovenian company Fotona developed a new computerized fire control system known as the EFCS-55B, or Enhanced Fire Control System. This system provided the gunner with an SGS-55 independent, stabilized day and night sight, equipped with a laser rangefinder. With this upgrade, the M-55S was capable of hitting a 1x1 meter target at a distance of 1,800 meters with a first shot. Commanders retained their original periscopes from before the modernization. In the case of the T-55A, this was the TPKU-2B binocular periscope, a daytime optical device offering switchable magnification between 1x and 5x. Beneath the periscope, the M-55S introduced a Comtos 55 Commander's Takeover system. This system provided the commander with an independent control panel and hydraulic gun controls, enabling them to take over target acquisition and weapon operation. This system provides the M-55S tank with a level of redundancy, enabling it to remain fully operational even if the gunner becomes a casualty or if his controls are damaged. The driver was equipped with a Kodris 5.5 or Combined Driver Scope 5.5 periscope, allowing both day and night operation without the need to switch devices. The driver has also received a large new display panel that shows information such as the current position of the main gun and the status of the tank's exterior lights, which have been completely redesigned compared to the original T-55. The M-55S retained the original T-55 crew layout, with the driver positioned at the front left of the hull, while the gunner, commander, and loader were located in the turret. The crew has been provided with modern internal and external communication systems, new helmets of Israeli origin, as well as an infantry telephone on the rear of the tank. The rear also features a large welded box used for stowage, which also houses the CNR 900 radio set, accessible from the crew compartment because the turret wall in the area of the stowage box has been cut out. The command tank variant is equipped with 2 of these radio sets. The crew communicates internally via a VIC-1 intercom system. This system is made to be used by vehicles that do not have an intercommunication system as part of their radio set. While the base armor of the T-55 remained unchanged, it was reinforced with Blazer, a first-generation explosive reactive armor system developed by the Israeli company Rafael Advanced Defense Systems. This system used metal plates layered around explosive compounds that detonated when struck by high-caliber projectiles. The blast disrupted the projectile's path and greatly reduced its ability to penetrate, particularly against heat warheads. On the M-55S, ERA provides substantial coverage, protecting the front of the hull, the upper hull sides of the crew compartment, most of the turret sides, and a significant portion of the turret front. While the exact specifications are classified, its effectiveness is believed to be on par with or slightly inferior to the Russian Contact 1 system. The tank is fitted with 10mm thick side skirts made of synthetic rubber reinforced with polymer fabric and steel wire mesh. Additional defensive upgrades include Fotona's NBC protection system and an automatic fire suppression system. All tanks are also equipped with a laser irradiation detection and response system, or LIRD for short. The system warns the crew when the vehicle is being targeted by laser-based devices such as rangefinders, designators, or illuminators. Upon detecting a threat, the system provides both visual and audio alerts while indicating the direction of the incoming laser. This enables the crew to take immediate countermeasures such as launching smoke or repositioning the tank. If the crew fails to respond, the system can automatically activate the IS-6 smoke grenade launchers with one 6-barrel launcher mounted on each side of the cupola. The M-55S upgrade package added approximately 3 tons to the vehicle's weight, bringing the total close to 40 metric tons. Unfortunately, the tank's engine and drivetrain were never replaced, and as a result, mobility suffered, especially when operating in Slovenia's hilly and mountainous terrain. On the paved roads, the M-55S's top speed is limited to 50 km per hour. The original manual transmission, featuring 5 forward gears and 1 reverse, also remained unchanged. However, some modifications were made to the running gear. 4 track return rollers were added, and the drive sprocket was replaced with the one taken from the M84 tank. The tracks themselves were also upgraded to a new design that included attachable rubber extensions, which were intended to reduce damage to paved surfaces. There are only 2 variants of the Slovenian M-55S tanks. The first is a command tank, which features 2 radio stations. It is unknown if Slovenians made more than one of these, and it is unclear if the tank is externally any different from the regular M-55S. The second variant, known as the M-55S USP, is a driver training vehicle and is far more visually distinctive. While the hull remains largely identical to that of the T-55S, apart from the removal of explosive reactive armor, the turret has been completely removed. In its place is a fixed canopy structure with large windows and seating for an instructor and up to 2 driver trainees. One downside of this variant is that it weighs only around 35 tons, approximately 5 tons less than a fully equipped M-55S. As a result, it is significantly easier to drive than the combat version it is intended to prepare crews for. Work on the modernization of the T-55s to the M-55S standard began in 1994, and by 1998 the first batch of 12 tanks was completed. The final vehicle was delivered in May 1999. Unfortunately, the project significantly exceeded its budget, and only 30 tanks were ultimately modernized, rather than the 60 originally planned. Of these, 12 were of Polish origin, while the remainder were presumably Soviet-built. T-55 tanks that were not modernized were retired and sold off. The initial goal was to modernize each tank at a cost of around $300,000 US. In reality, estimates place the final cost between $1.3 million and $1.8 million per vehicle. Notably, only about 35% of that amount accounted for the actual upgrade work. The remainder covered the development of new components, salaries, and procurement of ammunition and spare parts from Israel. Given that only about 25% of Slovenia's terrain is suitable for tanks and another 25% only semi-suitable, the decision to maintain 4 armored battalions eventually proved excessive. Over time, the Slovenian armed forces underwent several reforms, each reducing the number of tanks in active service. Ultimately, all M-55S tanks were assigned to the 74th Armored Mechanized Battalion, which would become the only Slovenian unit to operate them. In June 2006, the 74th Battalion was reorganized from an armored mechanized to a motorized unit, and the M-55S tanks were placed into the operational reserve. Half of the fleet underwent a conservation process and was placed in long-term storage, with the other half following by the end of the year. By 2016, the tanks were officially offered for sale, but only one tank, along with its share of ammunition, was reportedly sold to an unnamed Czech company. Another tank was likely retained by the Park of Military History in Pivka. The remaining 28 tanks, along with the 2 M55 USP training vehicles, were eventually delivered to Ukraine. On February 24, 2022, Russia launched a full-scale invasion of Ukraine. In response, many European countries began supplying Ukraine with heavy military equipment, including tanks. Smaller nations such as Slovenia had limited resources to contribute, but Germany sought to involve them through the so-called Ringtausch program. Ringtausch program, roughly translating to circular exchange, was designed to encourage European countries to donate older military equipment to Ukraine in exchange for newer German-manufactured replacements. As part of this initiative, Slovenia donated its remaining M-55S tanks, receiving 45 MAN KAT-1 transport trucks. Once in Ukraine, the M-55S tanks underwent a quick modernization, including the addition of slat armor around the engine compartment and extra layers of Contact 1 explosive reactive armor on the sides of the hull. Some vehicles would, over time, also be fitted with improvised anti-drone cope cages, although these varied from tank to tank and were not consistently installed across the fleet. As with most foreign equipment donated to Ukraine, the original camouflage remained intact, but the tanks did receive updated markings, typically featuring a large white cross on the hull sides and identification numbers on the turret sides and front mudguards. While these field upgrades modestly improved the tank's survivability, they also added more weight to a chassis already strained by the previous modernization process, something that the original engine and transmission are likely not well suited to handle. With its relatively light base armor, the M-55S was still quite vulnerable, especially in a battlefield environment saturated with loitering munitions, kamikaze drones, precision artillery, and advanced anti-tank guided missiles. Acknowledging these limitations, Ukraine wisely avoided deploying the tanks to the front lines. Instead, the M-55S has mostly seen use as a training vehicle. Since their arrival in Ukraine, the M-55S tanks have had a relatively low-profile service record, with few photographs or videos documenting their use. However, the limited visual evidence available does help to piece together their operational history and identify the units they have served with, though without the full picture, this is still going to be the author's best guess. The first unit to field the M-55S was the 47th Separate Mechanized Brigade, which had just undergone expansion and restructuring before receiving the tanks. These vehicles were likely intended for training purposes ahead of the brigade's delivery of more modern Leopard 2A6 main battle tanks. When the 47th Mechanized Brigade deployed to Zaporizhzhia Oblast in the summer of 2023 and launched a counteroffensive, the M-55S tanks did not accompany them, suggesting they had already been reassigned to another unit. If such a transfer did occur, the tanks appear to have gone to the 67th Mechanized Brigade, which was operating near the Russian-occupied town of Kreminna in northeastern Ukraine. This sector of the front was relatively quieter than the southern axis, making it more suitable for the aging M-55S. Nonetheless, the unit soon began taking losses. Around the 16th of July 2023, one of the tanks was hit directly by a Russian artillery shell just outside the town. The blast destroyed external systems, including the SGS-55 sight and the LIRD, and breached the roof armor, but the tank still managed to withdraw under its own power. On the 19th of July, another M-55S was shelled in the same area, though the extent of the damage remains unclear as the tank was obscured by the foliage. Then, on the 22nd of July, a third M-55S was struck by artillery and suffered a catastrophic explosion, resulting in the complete destruction of the vehicle. Sometime after the Crimean losses, the M-55S tanks were withdrawn from the front lines. They resurfaced in early 2024, appearing in two different units. The first new photos of M-55S tanks were released by the 5th Tank Brigade, a reserve formation stationed in Kryvyi Rih, on the 7th of March 2024. However, this brigade was soon restructured into a heavy mechanized formation equipped with Leopard 1 main battle tanks, and the M-55S was never showcased by the brigade again. Just a week later, on the 14th of March, the 127th Territorial Defense Brigade published a video showing M-55S tanks being used in an indirect fire role, with drone-assisted fire correction, effectively repurposing them as self-propelled artillery. The brigade continued posting photos of M-55S activity until the 24th of June 2024, suggesting the tanks may have remained operational within the unit for at least several months. Whether these tanks have been transferred from the 5th Tank Brigade or assigned independently remains unclear. By January 2025, the M-55S tanks were confirmed to be in service with the Tank Battalion of the newly formed 159th Separate Mechanized Brigade, stationed in the Mykolaiv Oblast. As of the time of writing, this is the unit presumed to currently operate all surviving M-55S tanks and is yet to see combat. Sometime in the first quarter of 2025, two Russian fiber-optic kamikaze drones found and attacked the M-55S tank parked in an Air Force hangar in the Goliapol area of Zaporizhia Oblast. The tank appears to have survived the first hit well, and the extent of the damage after the second hit is not known. It remains unclear whether this tank belonged to the 159th Separate Mechanized Brigade, to another unit, or perhaps to a repair depot. It is not controversial to state that the M-55S modernization project ultimately fell short of its ambitions. For the investment made, Slovenia succeeded in creating one of the most comprehensive and advanced T-55 modernization packages in the world. However, beneath the new optics, electronics, and armor, the vehicle still remained a design rooted in the early days of the Cold War. While the modernization brought the M-55S roughly on par with the M-84A4, the latter was already verging on obsolescence by the early 2000s. The result of the modernization, therefore, was short-lived and strategically limited. Equally disappointing were the expectations that the program would breathe new life into Slovenia's military-industrial complex, as those hopes never materialized. By 2001, the combined annual revenue of all Slovenian military companies was just $5 million, a dramatic fall from the $200+ million generated during the peak of Yugoslavia's defense industry in the 1980s. Thinly armored, overweight, and armed with a reliable but aging gun of relatively small caliber, the M-55S is poorly suited for modern combat in Ukraine. In armored engagements, it would be at a significant disadvantage against all but the oldest Russian tanks. Its light armor offers little protection against loitering munitions and kamikaze drones, now a persistent threat on the battlefield. Spare parts are also increasingly scarce. The T-55 platform was retired from Ukrainian service long ago, and Slovenian firms like Fortuna, once responsible for the production of key components, no longer exist. Yet in a war of attrition, nothing is wasted. Ukraine continues to extract maximum utility from these aging vehicles, whether through training, indirect fire support, or holding quiet sectors of the front while carefully keeping them out of high-intensity combat whenever possible. How many of these tanks will make it out remains to be seen. We would like to thank Supremacy World War III for sponsoring today's video. It's a free, real-time strategy game where you command a modern nation, build armies, and conquer the globe against other real players. Click the link below or scan the QR code on screen now to claim your free elite tank unit and start your fight for global supremacy today. If you haven't done so already, we invite you to subscribe to stay updated on future content. If you'd like to contribute further, consider supporting us on Patreon or PayPal. We want to especially thank our medium and heavy tank Patreon supporters: Barrett, Guntauer, Dan Fitzpatrick, Dave Schuford, Leslie Hochauer, Michael Herman, Owen M., R. Robb, and Sopwith21. Your generous contributions help fund our research, illustrations, and video production. Until next time, keep us in your sights.